I picked up my daughter's prescription at the pharmacy. My friend Margaret, who had worked the counter there for over 20 years, grabbed my arm before I could leave and whispered, "Harold, don't go home yet." I found something inside the bag that Derek dropped off. Something that made me lock myself in the back room and call my nephew. When I asked her what she meant, she slid a folded piece of paper across the counter with trembling hands. I looked down, and everything I thought I knew about the man my daughter had married collapsed in an instant. Before I tell you what Margaret found, I want to ask you something wherever you're listening to this from. Whether you're in Calgary like me or somewhere across this country, please stay with me until the end, because what happened next could happen to any family. It was a Wednesday afternoon in late October, the kind of gray Calgary day where the wind off the prairies cuts right through you no matter how many layers you're wearing. Claire had called me that morning from Montreal, where she'd been attending a nursing conference for the week. "Dad," she said, "could you please pick up my prescription from Redwood Pharmacy on 17th? Derek was supposed to grab it Monday, but he never did. I'll need it when I get back Friday evening." She had a recurring prescription for her thyroid medication. Nothing urgent, but she liked to stay on schedule. She gave me the confirmation number and hung up quickly. She had a seminar starting in 10 minutes. I didn't mind the errand. I was retired, 63 years old, and my days had a gentle rhythm built around the grandchildren. Emma was 6, and Liam was 4. They were staying at my place that week while Claire was in Montreal and Derek, my son-in-law, was supposedly managing things from home, or so I was told. Margaret Kowalski had been the head pharmacist at Redwood for as long as I could remember. She and my late wife Dorothy had volunteered together at Street Anthony's food bank every second Saturday for nearly a decade. Margaret was not a woman who rattled easily. She had worked through a robbery at the pharmacy in 2019 and gone straight back to filling prescriptions the following morning. So when I pushed through the glass door and saw her face pale, eyes darting toward the back, I felt something cold move through my chest before she said a single word. "Evening, Harold," she said quietly, but her usual warmth was missing entirely. She glanced past me at the other customers in the store. "Give me 1 minute." She disappeared into the dispensary and came back without the prescription bag. Instead, she had a small manila envelope tucked under her arm. She nodded toward the consultation room, a small private space behind a frosted glass partition, and I followed. "Close the door, please." I did. Margaret set the envelope on the narrow counter between us and pressed both palms flat on either side of it, like she was trying to stop it from moving. "Harold," she said, "Derek dropped off Claire's renewal slip on Monday morning. He said he'd be back to pick it up that same afternoon, but he never came. I filled it and set it aside. Yesterday, when I was organizing the pickup shelf, I noticed the bag felt heavier than it should. A thyroid prescription is just one small bottle." She paused, so I checked inside. My throat tightened. "What did you find?" She opened the envelope and slid out 2 items. The first was a folded document, a wire transfer confirmation printed on plain paper. The second was a photograph. The wire transfer was for $87,000. Sent from an account in Derek's name to a recipient bank in Budapest, Hungary. The date on the confirmation was 11 days ago. The reference line read simply, "Arrangement confirmed. Balance upon delivery." I stared at the number. $87,000. Derek worked in mid-level logistics management. He and Claire had a mortgage on their house in Brentwood, 2 car payments, and a line of credit they were slowly chipping away at. Where would he get $87,000? Then I looked at the photograph. It was Emma and Liam, standing in the backyard of Derek and Claire's house, wearing their Halloween costumes from last year. Emma was a butterfly, and Liam was a dinosaur. Someone had taken this photo from a distance, possibly through the fence. And across the top of the photo, written in black marker in a language I didn't recognize, were 2 neat lines of text beside each child's image. Margaret touched my arm. I showed the photo to my nephew Tomasz. He grew up in Krakow, speaks Polish, Ukrainian, and some Russian. She swallowed. "Harold, what's written there are physical descriptions of each child. Emma's height, hair color, eye color. Liam's, and beside each description, a number." She paused for a long moment. Tomasz said the numbers looked like pricing. The room went very quiet. I reached for the photograph. My hands were shaking badly enough that I knocked it sideways. Pricing. I heard myself say the word, and it sounded like it belonged to someone else's life, not mine. Not a grandfather standing under fluorescent lights at a pharmacy on 17th Avenue in Calgary. I know, Margaret whispered. Harold, I don't know what Derek is involved in, but those are your grandchildren in that photo. And someone wrote prices next to their faces. I thought about Emma asking me to braid her hair that morning because Derek hadn't come to wake them up. I thought about Liam dragging his dinosaur stuffed animal down the stairs and asking me why Daddy wasn't home for breakfast again. I had assumed Derek was sleeping in, working late. Men like Derek had moods I had learned not to ask. Where is he now? I asked. Derek, do you know? Margaret shook her head. He hasn't been back since Monday. I pulled out my phone. I need to make a call. My son Nathan answered on the second ring. He was 40 years old, lived in Edmonton, worked for the city in infrastructure planning. He was steady and practical in the way that second children sometimes are never one for panic, never one for theater. Nathan, I said, I need you to listen carefully. Something's wrong. Something's very wrong with Derek. There was a pause. I could hear him pulling away from whatever he was doing. Dad, what are you talking about? Claire's in Montreal. I know where your sister is. I took a breath. I'm at the pharmacy right now. Margaret found something in Claire's prescription bag. Something Derek left behind. I photographed the documents and sent them through to Nathan's phone. I want you to see these before I tell you what I think they mean. He went quiet. 30 seconds passed. Then, Dad, is that an international wire transfer? 87,000, Nathan. Sent to Budapest. And then there's the photograph. I heard him inhale sharply as he opened the second image. Those are Emma and Liam. Yes. Dad, what's written on it? Margaret's nephew translated it. It's physical descriptions, and what he believes are asking prices. The silence stretched long enough that I pressed the phone harder against my ear to make sure the call hadn't dropped. When Nathan spoke again, his voice was flat and careful in the way people's voices get when they are working very hard not to come apart. Where are the kids right now? At my place. The babysitter is with them. I left them playing after school. Dad, I need you to go straight there. Don't stop anywhere. Don't call Derek. Don't call Claire yet, not until we know more. What are you thinking? I'm thinking the man my sister married has done something we cannot come back from. Nathan's voice dropped. I'm booking the earliest flight to Calgary. Whatever Derek is planning, he doesn't know we've found this yet. That gives us time. But not much. I drove back to my house with both hands tight on the steering wheel and the manila envelope on the passenger seat. The Deerfoot Trail was busy with the evening rush. Brake lights stretching out ahead of me in both directions, and I remember thinking how strange it was that the city could look exactly the same as always when the world had just tilted completely sideways. The babysitter, a university student named Jess, opened the door before I'd finished climbing the porch steps. Emma was at the kitchen table drawing, and Liam was on the living room floor with his dinosaur figures lined up in a row he'd clearly spent considerable effort arranging. I paid Jess, thanked her, and waited until she'd gone before I sat down on the couch and tried to breathe normally. Grandpa, Emma said from the kitchen, without looking up from her drawing. Daddy texted me. I went very still. When? She checked her little tablet, a birthday gift she used mainly for drawing apps and video calls. An hour ago, she said. He said he'd be picking us up Saturday morning. She looked up, but that's not what Mommy said. Mommy said we're staying with you until she gets back Friday. What else did he say in the text? She looked at the screen again. He said to pack our bags tonight and not to tell anyone. I kept my face completely calm. I looked at Liam, who was making two dinosaurs argue over territory with intense seriousness. Then I looked at my granddaughter's open, trusting face. I'll talk to Daddy, sweetheart, I said. Don't worry about the bags tonight. Let's have supper first. Nathan's flight landed at 10:40 that night. By 11:15, he was sitting across from me at my kitchen table, the documents spread between us, his coat still on. He was a big man, like his grandfather had been, broad through the shoulders, and when he leaned forward to study the wire transfer confirmation, he looked the way our father used to look when something was genuinely wrong, very still, very focused. 87,000 Canadian, he said quietly. From an account in Derek's name, I confirmed. And it was sent the same week Claire left for Montreal. Nathan picked up the photograph carefully, by the edges. When he saw what was written beside the children's faces, he set it back down and pressed both fists against the table. He sat like that for a moment. Dad, he said. I called a friend before my flight. A lawyer I went to university with, David Chen. He practices criminal law in Calgary. He also does some work with the RCMP's Major Crimes Unit as a civilian consultant. I explained the situation in general terms, and David said to come to him first thing tomorrow morning. He said if this is what it looks like, the RCMP need to be involved immediately, but the approach matters. We don't want to tip Derek off before we understand how far this goes. I nodded. There's something else. I told him about the text Derek had sent Emma. Pack your bags. Don't tell anyone. Saturday morning pickup. Nathan's jaw tightened. Saturday is 2 days away, which means we need to move the children somewhere safe tomorrow, I said. He looked at me. Halifax. Your Aunt Ruth, I said. Yes. My sister Ruth lived in Dartmouth, across the harbor from Halifax. She was 68, widowed, fiercely competent, and the kind of woman who had been waiting her entire adult life for someone to ask her to do something genuinely important. She would not ask unnecessary questions. She would answer her phone at any hour. Nathan was already searching flights on his phone. There's a WestJet connection through Toronto. Leaves YYC at 7 to 10 tomorrow morning. Arrives Halifax at 4:15 in the afternoon. He looked up. 4 seats? Book it, I said. He paused over his phone, then looked at me with a different expression. Dad, when we leave, we can't let Derek know where we're going. I know. So we leave a note for Claire only, not Derek. And we tell her the wrong destination somewhere she can confirm we're safe, but that won't lead Derek to the children if he sees it. He thought for a moment. Tell her we've taken the kids to visit your old friend Bill in Whistler. Give her the code word we used when we were kids. She'll know it means something is wrong, and that the real location will follow through a different channel. We had a family code from when Nathan and Claire were teenagers. A holdover from an era when Dorothy and I had tried to make the children feel they could signal for help in social situations without embarrassment. The word was lighthouse. I'll text her lighthouse, I said. She'll understand. Nathan finished booking the flights. Then he sat back in his chair and rubbed his face with both hands. Dad, if David confirms tomorrow what we think this is, he stopped. Claire doesn't know, does she? She has no idea. I don't believe she does. He was quiet for a moment. She married him, Dad. She trusted him with her children. I know, son. He looked at the photograph of Emma and Liam, their small faces marked with numbers. How can a man who sat at your Christmas table and coached Liam's Timbits hockey do this? I had no answer for that. Some questions don't have answers that make sense of anything. We woke the children at 5:15. I sat on the edge of Emma's bed and smoothed the hair back from her forehead the way Dorothy used to do. Hey, sweetheart, time to wake up. We're going on a surprise trip. She opened her eyes, confused by the darkness outside the window. Where are we going? To see Aunt Ruth in Halifax. Uncle Nathan is coming too. That woke her up faster than any alarm. Emma loved Aunt Ruth, who had a large dog named Captain and a house that smelled like cinnamon and wood smoke. Liam, when I carried him downstairs, still half asleep, and buckled him into his booster seat in Nathan's rental car, clutched his dinosaur and went right back to sleep against my arm. Emma asked, as we turned onto the highway toward the airport, why Mommy wasn't coming. Mommy's still in Montreal for her conference, I said. She'll meet us later, sweetheart. Emma considered this. What about Daddy? Your dad has some things he needs to sort out, Nathan said carefully from the driver's seat. So right now it's just us on an adventure. She accepted this in the way children accept things when they can tell the adults in the room are being gentle with them for reasons they can't quite see. She looked out the window at the dark prairie sky. Grandpa, she said quietly, is everything okay? Everything is going to be okay, I told her. I promise. I meant it with everything I had. At the airport, Nathan handled the check-in while I kept the children close at my side. The terminal was quiet at that hour, a few business travelers, a family with an infant, a pair of elderly women dragging matching suitcases toward the International Departures Board. Liam woke up fully once we reached the gate and became interested in the planes on the tarmac. He pressed his face to the window and fogged the glass with his breath. Grandpa, that one's enormous, he said. The biggest ones carry the most people, I told him. He thought about this seriously. Are we going somewhere far? Far enough, I said. On the plane, Emma fell asleep over Saskatchewan and didn't wake until we were beginning our descent into Toronto. Liam sat beside me for most of the flight and wanted me to make his dinosaur walk across the tray table. So I did. 2 hours of dinosaur stories at 30,000 feet, somewhere over the Canadian Shield. I didn't mind. I would have walked that dinosaur across every inch of the country if it kept those two safe. David Chen's office was downtown in a glass tower 2 blocks from the Bow River. He was in his early 50s, methodical and direct in the way that good lawyers tend to be when the stakes are genuinely serious. He had reviewed the photographs Nathan had sent him the night before, and when we sat down across from his desk that morning, Nathan and I, while the children were safely with Nathan's friend and her kids nearby, David's expression told me everything before he said a word. He studied the wire transfer first. 87,000 Canadian, he said, to a receiving account in Budapest. The reference to arrangement confirmed, balance upon delivery in the context of the photograph, that language is consistent with what law enforcement calls a prepayment structure in child trafficking cases. He let that sit for a moment. The descriptions written on the photograph. Your pharmacist's nephew translated these correctly? Margaret is extremely reliable, I said. And Thomas, her nephew, he's a translator by profession. David nodded. I've already been in contact with a contact at the RCMP's Human Trafficking National Coordination Center. This is a federal matter, Mr. MacAllister. The RCMP need to take this evidence today. He picked up the photograph of Emma and Liam. He held it for a moment, and his professional composure shifted just slightly. Then, he set it down. The name of the account recipient in Budapest matches an individual under active RCMP intelligence review, he said. I can't say more than that until they brief you officially. But gentlemen, your instinct to remove those children from Calgary last night was the right call. His voice was quiet. The text your son-in-law sent to your granddaughter, pack your bags. Don't tell anyone, that has a very specific pattern. He paused. Saturday was likely the planned date of transfer. Nathan gripped the arm of his chair. My sister is still in Montreal. She needs to be told. Carefully, and through law enforcement if possible, so she doesn't contact Derek in a way that alerts him. David reached for his phone. I'm calling Constable Bouchard now. She leads the Calgary-based HT unit, and she's been briefed on this case at a preliminary level. She'll want to meet with you both today. He dialed. Nathan and I sat in the glass-walled office and watched the sun come up over the Calgary skyline through the windows, neither of us speaking. Constable Sarah Bouchard was younger than I expected, mid-30s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of practiced calm that comes from years of seeing things that would unhinge most people. She came to David's office within the hour, accompanied by a colleague, and she asked us to walk her through everything from the beginning. The phone call from Claire, the pharmacy, Margaret, the photograph, the text to Emma. She listened without interrupting. When we finished, she opened her laptop and turned it so we could see the screen. This is the individual associated with the Budapest account, she said. She showed us a photograph, a man in his 50s, heavy-set, well-dressed, photographed at what appeared to be a European hotel lobby. His name is Piotr Medek. He's been on RCMP and Interpol radar for 6 years. He operates a network that sources children from English-speaking countries, primarily Canada and the UK, for buyers in Eastern Europe and the Middle East. She paused. He has never been charged, because every time we get close, the domestic contact, the person inside the family, disappears before we can make an arrest. She looked at me. The domestic contact, in your family's case, appears to be your son-in-law. The room went very quiet. Your daughter, she said carefully. We have no evidence at this stage that she has any knowledge of her husband's activities. In fact, it would be consistent with Medek's pattern to target single-income or financially stressed families and recruit one partner without the other's knowledge. He offers significant money and presents it as something that will never be discovered. Derek and Claire had been struggling financially. I knew this in the vague, carefully not discussed way that parents know things about their children's marriages. There had been a stretch last winter when Claire mentioned they were sorting some things out. I hadn't pressed. What do we do? Nathan asked. We need your son-in-law to believe nothing has changed, Constable Bouchard said. As of right now, he doesn't know the children have left Calgary. He texted your granddaughter last night, but when he follows up and finds that you've taken them somewhere, we want to control what he does next. She turned to a new screen. We'll want to monitor his communications beginning today. And we'll need to coordinate with our colleagues in Montreal to speak with your daughter in a way that doesn't cause her to contact Derek before we're ready to move. Nathan leaned forward. When do you move? When he makes contact with Medic confirming that the arrangement is falling apart. That's when we'll have the evidence we need for both a Canadian arrest and an international warrant. Bouchard's voice was steady. Mr. MacAllister, the children are currently in Halifax? Yes. With my sister. Good. Keep them there. Don't tell anyone else their location. She looked at both of us. And please do not contact Derek. Not yet. We watched it unfold over the next 48 hours from a distance that felt physically painful. Nathan stayed in Calgary while I flew back to Halifax to be with Emma and Liam. My sister Ruth had told the children we were on an unexpected holiday, and she was so convincingly cheerful about it that Liam had decided this was the best week of his life. Captain the dog had taken a particular interest in him, and the two of them spent large portions of each day in the backyard in a state of mutual admiration. But it was Emma who stopped me on the second evening, when I was standing at Ruth's kitchen window looking at nothing in particular. She slipped her small hand into mine. Grandpa, she said, you have the same face you had when Grandma Dorothy was sick, like you're trying not to show something. I looked down at her. She was 6 years old, and she had her grandmother's eyes, that particular shade of gray-green that Dorothy used to say was the color of the ocean before a storm. I'm just tired, sweetheart, I told her. It's been a busy few days. She studied my face for a moment longer with that unsettling perception that young children have. Then she squeezed my hand. I like it here, she said. It feels like somewhere nothing bad can find us. I pulled her close and held on. You're safe, I said. I've got you. Nathan called me that night. His voice was controlled, but I could hear what was underneath it. Dad, Derek went to the house this morning. He found the note, the one with the Whistler cover story. He sat on it for a few hours, then called Claire's phone and got no answer. She'd been taken in by RCMP that afternoon to be interviewed. They told her everything. How is she? Nathan was quiet for a moment. Not good. He paused. She didn't know, Dad. She genuinely had no idea. Bouchard confirmed it. There's nothing in Derek's communications that suggests Claire was involved at any point. He kept it completely separate from their home life. Of course she didn't know, I said. She's her mother's daughter. Dorothy would never. I know, Nathan said quietly. I know. He had a reason for the money, Nathan continued. Derek had accumulated a significant gambling debt, not through casinos, through illegal online betting. He was into it for over $130,000, and the people he owed were not the kind who send reminder notices. Medic's network found him through that channel. They paid off the debt, and Derek's part of the arrangement was to provide 2 children matching Medic's buyer specifications. He paused. $87,000 was his second payment. There was a first payment of $43,000 4 weeks ago that we found in a separate account. I sat down on Ruth's back porch steps. Liam was already in bed. The Halifax night was cool and salt-smelling, the harbor somewhere just beyond the trees at the edge of the yard. Where is Derek now? I asked. RCMP arrested him at a Tim Hortons on McLeod Trail at 6 this evening, Nathan said. He was meeting someone, a local intermediary for Medic's network. They arrested both of them simultaneously. Medic has been flagged with Interpol, and there are warrants being processed through the Hungarian authorities. His network is much larger than just our case. Bouchard said there are at least 14 other children in various stages of what she called the pipeline. 14, I repeated. Nathan let out a long breath. RCMP is calling it the largest domestic trafficking bust in Alberta this year, Dad. The evidence from Derek's phone and the documents from the pharmacy were the thread that unraveled the whole thing. He paused. Margaret saved the kids. You going to that pharmacy saved the kids. I sat on those porch steps for a long time after we hung up. The stars over Halifax were very clear that night, the kind of sky you only get when the air is clean and cold and the city quiets down enough to let you see what's actually up there. I thought about Dorothy. I thought about the last time she held Emma in the hospital 2 years before Emma started school, both of them in that reclining chair by the window with the afternoon light coming in. Dorothy had said to me later, when Emma had gone to find Nathan in the cafeteria, Harold, you watch over those babies. Whatever it takes, promise me. I promised. Claire flew into Halifax the following morning. Ruth picked her up from the airport, and I waited at the house. When she came through the front door, she looked like someone had taken everything that made up her face and reassembled it slightly wrong. She was holding herself very carefully, the way people do when they've been crying for a long time and have temporarily run out. Emma and Liam ran to her from the living room, and she went down to her knees on Ruth's hardwood floor and held both of them at once without saying anything at all. She just held them. Liam said, "Mom, you're squeezing," and she laughed, which made her cry again. Later, when the children were watching a movie with Aunt Ruth and Captain the dog, Claire and I sat in the kitchen with tea that neither of us drank. She stared at her hands wrapped around the mug. "Dad," she said finally. "He was their father. He sat at our dinner table every night. He drove them to school. Her voice broke and she stopped. "I know," I said. "I know, sweetheart. How do you," she stopped again, "how do you ever look at a person and really know?" "You don't always," I said. "That's the hard truth. You trust, and then when trust is broken, you grieve it. But you also keep the people you love close, and you don't let the ones who failed them define what family means." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked up at me. "You promised Mom you'd watch over them." I nodded. "She told me," Claire said. "Last time I visited her, before she went. She made you promise." "She told you that?" Claire almost smiled. "Mom told me everything eventually." 3 months later, I sat in the public gallery of a Calgary federal courthouse while Derek received his sentence. He had entered a guilty plea conspiracy to traffic persons under 18, participation in a criminal organization, breach of trust. His intermediary had already been sentenced separately. Charges against Piotr Medek were moving through international channels with the cooperation of Hungarian and Austrian authorities. Claire sat beside me in the gallery, Nathan on the other side. Emma and Liam were in school 6 blocks from Ruth's house in Dartmouth. They had moved to Halifax. Claire and the children, at least for now. A fresh start, new routines. A school where Emma had already made 2 friends, and Liam had been appointed unofficial dinosaur expert by his junior kindergarten class. The judge, the Honorable Justice Patricia Okafor, reviewed the impact statements from Nathan and Claire before addressing the court. She spoke about the particular violence of betrayal within a family. She spoke about children as the most vulnerable members of any society, and about the responsibility the court had to reflect that in sentencing. "Derek Hayes," she said, "the evidence in this matter shows a deliberate, calculated attempt to exploit your position as a parent and stepfather to facilitate serious harm to children in your care. The breach of trust involved is among the most grave this court considers." She sentenced him to 14 years, with no eligibility for parole before serving 2/3. In addition to the criminal sentence, a lifetime prohibition from contact with any person under 16. Outside the courthouse, Claire and Nathan and I stood on the steps in the November cold. A few snowflakes were starting to come down. Claire pulled her coat tighter. "Is it enough?" Nathan asked quietly. "No sentence would ever be enough," I said. "But it's what justice looks like here." Claire looked out at the street, at the ordinary Thursday afternoon going on around us. People walking, dogs, a delivery truck, a bus pulling away from the stop at the corner. "Is it strange," she said, "that I keep thinking about Margaret? The pharmacist?" She nodded. She found that document. She could have just put it in the garbage and assumed it was nothing. She paused. But she didn't. She kept it. "She found you." I thought about Margaret, standing at that consultation room counter with her palms pressed flat on either side of the envelope. A woman who had known my late wife, who had watched my children grow up through the years they came in for cold remedies and back-to-school vaccinations and every ordinary thing a pharmacy is part of. "God puts people exactly where they need to be," I said. "And sometimes it's the most ordinary place imaginable. A counter, a prescription bag, a woman who trusted what she felt." Claire reached over and took my hand. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. When I called Ruth that evening and heard Emma's voice in the background asking what was for dinner, and Liam insisting with great seriousness that Captain deserved a vote in the matter, I sat in my rental car in the parking garage under the courthouse, and I closed my eyes, and I was quiet for a while. Dorothy, I thought. I kept my promise. The hardest part of a story like this one is not the fear, and it's not even the grief. The hardest part is learning to trust again, not blindly, not naively, but with clear eyes and an understanding that love requires vigilance, not just warmth. That protecting the people you cherish sometimes means paying attention to the small things. A prescription not picked up, a text that arrives at the wrong hour, a friend behind a counter who pulls you aside with shaking hands. Emma called me on a Sunday in December from Halifax. She had made me a Christmas card at school, a drawing of all of us standing in front of what I recognized, by the lopsided chimney, as meant to be Ruth's house. Captain was in the picture, rendered in an impressionistic style that I found deeply charming. "Grandpa," she said, "I drew a lighthouse on it too, because of our code word. You remembered that?" She considered this. "I didn't know what it meant then," she said, "but I knew it was something you and Mommy made up, so she'd know to listen." She paused. "Grandpa, do all families have a word like that?" "Good families do, sweetheart. We're a good family," she said with the certainty of a 6-year-old who has decided something completely. "Yes," I said, "we are." If this story made you hold your family a little closer tonight, please share it with someone you love. And in the comments, tell me where are you listening from this evening, and tell me about a time someone protected you, or you protected someone you love. Your story matters. We're all of us guardians for the ones who can't yet protect themselves. That's what family means. That's what it has always meant.